Roman writhed, jerked his head, but Artem's strong fingers gripped his jaws, keeping his mouth open. The gray-green mass of concrete flowed from the bucket, filling his throat, spreading over his tongue, packing into his teeth. "Don't worry, you worm," Artem said calmly. "I've almost forgiven you. Just finishing up, and the rot coming from you will be gone forever." Roman gasped, his eyes widened, tears streamed down his dirty cheeks. He tried to scream, but the concrete had already filled his mouth, muffling his cries to moaning. Artem leaned closer, studying how the material slowly hardened on the lips of his wife's lover. "What do you think, when it hardens near your dignity, will it break off the first time or will it take two?" Roman jerked in panic, but his hands were tied, and his legs were immersed in still fresh solution. The moaning grew louder. He tried to shake his head, spitting out the concrete, but it had already restrained his breathing. Artem chuckled and wiped his hands on his pants. "Don't choke on me too soon, Roman. I haven't had my fill yet." He lifted the bucket and poured the rest onto the captive's chest. The concrete spread, filling every crevice, taking away the last moments of freedom. Artem squatted down, watching this spectacle like an architect perfecting a project. "Now it's all beautiful. I always thought our family was like a well-built house. A precisely calculated foundation, strong walls, a reliable roof. Everything stays in place, everything stands as it should. Olga and I were together for more than 10 years, and during that time, I never doubted the strength of this structure. We didn't have a perfect marriage. What is a perfect marriage anyway? Those are fairy tales for those who don't understand how life works. There were arguments, where are they not? Sometimes we got tired of each other, sometimes we lived our separate lives for weeks. But in the end, we always returned to the usual order of things. To our home. I worked as a civil engineer, involved in the design and reconstruction of buildings. Sometimes I was at sites until late evening, sometimes I disappeared into the drawings for days. I liked creating something lasting, leaving behind structures that would stand for decades. That was the meaning of my work. Olga worked in an office, dealt with sales. At first, it was just a job for money, but over time, she started to like it. She got involved, started participating in corporate training, aiming for career growth. I supported her. It seemed right that each of us had our own thing, our own goal. We lived in a private house. I built it myself, starting from scratch. Years went into making it perfect, but now we had everything we wanted. A spacious kitchen, a large living room, a cozy bedroom. Olga loved to decorate the house, change the interior, add small details that made it truly ours. Everything went its way. In the morning, I got up before Olga, made coffee, went out to the yard. Sometimes Olga followed me, stretched out to me, hugged me from behind. We stood like that, watching the sunrise. In the evenings, she cooked dinner, played background music, sometimes talked about what was new at work. I nodded, listened, made comments. It was enough for me just to be near, to hear her voice, to see how she moved around the kitchen. We often dined alone, sometimes friends dropped by, sometimes we went into the city. A simple, calm life, in which I was confident. Of course, there were moments when something went wrong. Sometimes I noticed that Olga was drifting away. That her gaze became distant, that she answered monosyllabically, as if mentally somewhere else. Sometimes she spent evenings on her phone, scrolling through social media feeds, forgetting even to look my way. But I didn't make much of it. We all get tired, we all have days when we don't want to talk. I wasn't the kind of husband who clings to every word, who makes a fuss over trifles. I thought everything was stable. That if the foundation is strong, then small cracks won't destroy it. That's what I thought. Until Roman started coming over too often. I first saw Roman in passing. He was standing at the door when I pulled up home, leaning his shoulder against the doorframe, with that relaxed self-assurance of people who think they're the center of the universe. Smirk, hands in his pockets, a smug smile that you just wanted to wipe off. "Hey Artem," he cheerily threw, as if we were old friends. I got out of the car, giving him a quick glance before slamming the door. "Do we know each other?" "Oh, come on, don't be so stern." He lazily waved his hand. I'm Roman, Olga's colleague. Just popped in to chat. I nodded, examining him. Nothing special, a typical office type, slick, well-groomed, with a perfect hairstyle like people who've never done a hard day's work. Expensive watch, 2 clean shoes. Everything about him was irritatingly cloying. Go ahead, chat, I muttered, passing by. Olga sat in the living room, her legs tucked under, a cup of tea in her hands. She smiled, but her eyes were tense. Artem, you're early? Yes, I decided to come home early, and here I see we have a new family tradition, guests without warning. Roman smirked. Sorry, buddy, I would have warned you, but I thought that in good families, the doors are always open. Really? Well, you know, I have a habit of locking the doors. I don't like it when various mice run around in the house. I said this calmly, without any unnecessary emotion, just observing his reaction. He pretended not to understand, but a nerve twitched at the corner of his mouth. Cool place you have here, he continued, looking around the living room. Did you do all this yourself? Everything. Wow. He nodded as if he had just learned that I knew how to tie my shoelaces. I really don't understand how you can spend so much effort on one house. If I were you, I would have moved to a penthouse long ago where you don't have to dig the soil and haul bricks yourself. I looked at him, slightly tilting my head. And I don't understand how you can be a grown man and still believe in fairy tales about an easy life. But we both continue to live in our own worlds, right? Olga fidgeted nervously. Okay, she hurried, let's not jab at each other. Roman just chuckled, looking at me with a probing interest. Well, okay, Artem, I'll go. Olga, thanks for the tea. It was nice meeting you. He left. I watched him go, then turned to my wife. Does he often come over just to chat? She sighed. Are you starting this again? No, I'm just finishing it. The next day I decided to pour a new foundation in the garage. The old one had slightly cracked, and the floor needed leveling. The work wasn't difficult, but it was tedious. I set about the task, immersing myself in the usual meditative silence that work with concrete always brought me. I had almost finished when I heard footsteps behind me. Oh, I didn't know. You had a construction site here too. I slowly turned around. Roman. He stood at the threshold of the garage, looking around with an expression of barely concealed, disdainful curiosity. So you're a real builder, huh? All day in concrete, dirty, tired. Must be fun for you. I set the shovel down and wiped my hands. And you, I see, have fun barging into other people's homes uninvited? Come on, I just dropped by. Is Olga home? No, but you decided to come anyway? He didn't answer, just snorted and took a step inside. Listen, are you sure you know what you're doing? He asked, looking at the unset concrete under his feet. Of course. I smiled. For instance, I know that if you step into fresh concrete, cleaning your shoes afterward is a real hassle. Roman looked away, but then smirked again. I hope you mixed everything right. It would be a shame if the foundation cracked, you know, like in houses built on a poor foundation. I paused. Are you talking about houses or marriages? He tensed up slightly but quickly composed himself. Just pondering. Well, keep pondering somewhere else. Roman smiled, turned around, and walked back toward the house, but misjudged his step and caught his heel on the edge of the unset concrete. Damn it, came his exasperated cry. I slowly exhaled and raised my eyebrows. Oh, sorry. You're an office guy. I didn't know you'd be unfamiliar with concrete being liquid at first. Go to hell, he muttered, pulling his foot out. I tilted my head, watching him shake off his boot. The important thing, Roman, is not to get stuck in life the way you got stuck here. He gave me a quick glance, full of irritation. Does Olga know what an asshole you are? I smirked. Do you know that concrete sets faster if there's a lot of crap in it? Roman didn't respond. He just exhaled angrily and left. I watched him go and for the first time thought that this little scene was just the beginning. I didn't like surprises. All my life, I built, calculated, assessed risks, made sure there were no unexpected collapses. In buildings, as in life, the foundation is important. If it is strong, it will withstand any load. If there are cracks, they start small, almost invisible. And then, bam, everything collapses to hell. I returned home earlier than usual. Materials had run out at the site, and there was no point in staying. As I approached the house, I noticed a foreign car parked slightly aside. I recognized it immediately. Black, brand new, with tinted windows. Roman's car. I neither sped up nor slowed down. I walked just as I always did. The house was warm, quiet. The kitchen light was on, and voices could be heard from the slightly open living room door. "So, kitten, have you thought about it?" Roman's voice was lazy, content. "Don't start," Olga sighed. I stopped in the hallway, slightly tilting my head to hear better. "Come on, Olga. Everything is fine. Why do you need a divorce? He's trusting, he won't suspect anything." Silence. "Are you so sure about that?" Her voice was quieter, but not outraged or scared. "Absolutely. He loves you. Trusts you. You just say you're going to work, and come to me. He doesn't even ask." My heart beat steadily. "It's not that simple, Roman. It's that simple, kitten. Just don't panic. He's not a fool, but husbands don't believe in such things until you rub their noses in it." Silence. I couldn't see them, but I imagined them. He was sitting, sprawled out, with the same cocky smirk he had in the garage. She was next to him, maybe twirling a strand of hair around her finger, maybe looking down as she did when she didn't want to face the truth. What if he figures it out? Roman chuckled. He's a builder, not a detective. People like him live by the rules. If the house stands, it means it's strong. "Don't worry, darling. Everything will be as it should be." I closed my eyes for a second. Inhaled. Exhaled. Then I opened the door. "Olga, are you home?" Roman quickly moved away. Olga jumped up from the couch, her eyes widened, but she immediately composed herself. "Artem? You're early. Materials ran out, had to come back." I calmly took off my jacket, threw it on a hook. Then looked at Roman, who had already stood up, adjusting his jacket sleeves. "Oh, hello, Artem. We were just having coffee." I nodded. "Coffee. Good. It's always helpful to stay alert." Olga looked away. "Artem, It's okay," I smiled, pretending to notice nothing. "Was there something you wanted to tell me?" She hesitated. "No, just, you came so unexpectedly." I smiled wider. "Unexpectedly?" "Yes, that happens." Roman quickly assessed the situation. He clearly expected a different reaction. "All right, I must go," he said, smiling too broadly. "Olga, thanks for the coffee." I stepped aside, letting him pass. He moved towards the exit but suddenly paused next to me, slightly tilting his head. "You know, drop by sometime, Artem. We could socialize as families." I looked him straight in the eye. "Sure, Roman. I'll drop by sometime." He nodded, patted my shoulder, and left. I heard the door slam, the engine of his car start. Then there was silence. Olga was looking at the floor. I approached her, leaned in, and ran my hand over her cheek. She flinched. "Are you tired?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Then rest. I'll take care of everything today." She pressed her lips together, nodded again, and quickly went to the bedroom. I stood in the silence. Looked at the cups with unfinished coffee. And then went to the garage. I had a lot of work to do. The next day I was the same Artem that Olga knew. I kissed her on the forehead, poured coffee, asked how she slept. I smiled, listened to her talk about work, as if nothing had happened. I didn't accuse, didn't get angry, didn't make a scene. I waited. And at night, I worked. When Olga fell asleep, I sat down at the computer. I knew Roman was a certain type, but I needed facts. Some weaknesses to exploit. He thought I was trusting, that it was enough to lay a solid foundation and ignore the cracks. He was wrong. The first thing I did was hack her phone. I knew the password. Birth dates, anniversaries, favorite numbers, all of it had long since formed into ready combinations in my mind. Hacking into it turned out to be easier than I thought. The chats with Roman were predictable. Can't make it today, he's at home. Relax, kitten, he won't suspect a thing. I can't, I'm scared. Have you seen him? He's like a blind puppy, believes every word you say. Puppy. I smiled, taking screenshots. Next was Roman himself. I found his social media profile, studied his friends, subscriptions, old photos. Just an ordinary office crook who loved fancy cars, cheap whiskey, and a sense of his own importance. I tracked down his phone number through one of the gray databases available online. Found his address, place of work, even that he had a credit history full of late payments. Excellent. Then I began to destroy his life. Slowly. Carefully. I wasn't in a hurry. By day I was the same caring husband. I smiled, asked Olga how her day went. I was attentive, gently touched her hand at breakfast, acted as if nothing had changed. But at night, I dismantled Roman's life piece by piece. The first strike was simple. I created several anonymous accounts and sent friendly messages to his boss. They included screenshots of the chats, hints of office romances, subtle suggestions that he was using office time for personal affairs. I knew that corporate companies dislike scandals. A few days later, Roman became anxious, was called into management, and then suddenly started having issues with his bonus. Olga didn't understand why he was irritable. You seem not yourself, she told him one evening, when I accidentally, not really, overheard their phone conversation. It's all right, just idiots at work. I smiled, lying in bed. But that was just the beginning. The next night, I found his old loan debts. Made slight adjustments to his banking details, enough to trigger suspicious inquiries about his creditworthiness. Banks don't like risks. His salary began to be delayed at work. Roman freaked out, not understanding where the wind was blowing from. Olga started to notice that he wasn't as confident. I saw how she began to worry. She didn't understand what was happening, why he wasn't writing as often as before, why he had become more irritable. And I just sat at dinner, smiling and asking, everything all right? Olga nodded. But I saw how she nervously bit her lip. Roman was driving on the nighttime highway, unaware that his life was about to turn into hell. He was pleased with himself. Thought everything was under control. Thought he could walk into someone else's house, sit at someone else's table, whisper in someone else's wife's ear, and nothing would happen. But the world doesn't work that way. I stood in the shadows, watching as he got into his car, whistling some tune. He was relaxed. Confident that he controlled the situation. I love such people. 2 days ago, I had discreetly approached his car and conducted a little technical inspection. It was winter, roads were slippery. I knew that brakes were the most crucial thing to be in perfect condition. I also knew that it only took a little damage to the brake hoses for them to fail at just the right moment. Not immediately, no. Let everything be fine at first. Let him drive, let him pick up speed. I knew the road he took. There was a turn ahead, followed by a steep descent. And if the brakes failed at that moment, I stood in the shadows, watching as he drove away. And smiled. Roman was approaching the turn when he first felt something was wrong. He pressed the brake pedal, but the car didn't slow down. What the hell? He muttered, pressing harder. Nothing. The speedometer needle climbed higher, the road sloped downward. He gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding faster. Come on, damn it. He started pulling the handbrake, but at that speed, it could only spin him out. Lights of oncoming cars flashed by. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to control the car, but now it wouldn't listen to him. Then he saw the truck. A huge, metal monster that wasn't going to stop. Roman yanked the wheel aside, trying to dodge. The car skidded, spun around, and he was thrown into the opposite lane. Desperately, he pulled the handbrake, and finally, he was thrown into the ditch. A hard hit. The car flipped a couple of times and came to a halt. He was gasping, shaking. Trying to figure out if he was alive at all, Roman felt himself over. Everything was in place. His head was spinning, but he was alive. Lucky. I arrived at the scene 10 minutes later. I stood a little aside, watched. The car was overturned, but not badly damaged. One more second, and he would have been under the wheels of the truck, but unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. I watched as he crawled out of the car, staggering like a drunk. Hands trembling, lips pale. Scary, isn't it, bastard? I pulled out my phone and dialed Olga's number. Have you heard? I asked as soon as she picked up. What? Roman had an accident. She froze. What? How? It seems there were problems with the brakes. But he's alive. She breathed rapidly, unevenly. Where is he? I looked at the bastard. How he, with trembling hands, was trying to make a call on his phone. Don't worry, dear, I said quietly. He'll be all right. For now. I hung up. Roman was looking around, still in shock. I smiled, started the car, and slowly drove past. I saw him notice me. His eyes widened. Realization slowly crept into his consciousness. He couldn't be sure. But he felt it. Felt that this was no coincidence. I rolled down the window, gave him a quick glance, nodded. And drove on. I always loved symmetry. In architecture, in the construction of buildings, in clear proportions, symmetry gave everything order. Balance. Justice. And justice is when if someone crosses the boundaries, those same boundaries blur for them as well. So, when I found out that Roman had a wife, the idea came to me on its own. The day was ordinary. Warm, lazy, Saturday. I wasn't in a hurry. I left the house a bit later than usual, stopped to pick up flowers, nice, expensive ones, not those cheap bouquets people buy at stalls. Natalia, Roman's wife, worked at a small design studio. Attractive, well-kept, with a light social veneer. Someone accustomed to luxury but not spoiled. And most importantly, a woman lacking her husband's attention. I arrived at her place in the afternoon. Artem, she was surprised when she opened the door. Hello, Natalia, I smiled. I hope I'm not disturbing. No, come in, she stepped aside, letting me in. I handed her the flowers, and her eyes lit up with surprise. My God, these are beautiful. For me? Of course. Who else? She led me into the living room, where it smelled of coffee and expensive perfume. We drank coffee, talked, laughed. I listened to her attentively, looked into her eyes, joked just enough to hang a slight tension between us. Natalia responded in kind. I saw how her gaze slid over me. How her fingers touched a strand of hair when she spoke. How her lips slightly parted when she laughed. The rest was a matter of time. Roman arrived unexpectedly. I heard the sound of a car, then rapid footsteps up the stairs. The door burst open. And he froze. I was in the living room, slowly buttoning up my shirt. Natalia sat in the armchair, relaxed, pleased, with a light smile on her face. What the? Roman managed to say. I buttoned the last button, adjusted my cuffs, looked at him, and smiled. Oh, Roman, hello. I stepped towards him as if glad to see an old friend. He blinked, looking back and forth between me and Natalia. What are you doing here? I tilted my head as if surprised by his question. What do you mean? I shrugged, smiling. You said it yourself, let's be friends as families. So I decided to befriend your wife. I patted his shoulder. A light pat, but I heard his teeth grind. You're mocking me? I smirked. Not at all, Roman. I'm just taking a leaf out of your book. You're friends with my wife, I'm friends with yours. Fair's fair, right? He clenched his fists, his face turned crimson. You bastard. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, Roman, why are you so tense? If you can sleep with other men's wives, why can't someone sleep with yours? His face contorted. I saw that he wanted to hit me. How his fists clenched, how his shoulders tensed. But he didn't strike. Because he understood. Understood that I hadn't done this just because. That this wasn't about infidelity. This was about revenge. Natalia had been silent all this time. She just watched. And in her eyes was the same realization. Silence hung between us. Long drawn out. Finally, I nodded to Roman, patted his shoulder again, squeezing it slightly, as one does when wanting to show who's stronger. Well, my friend, it was nice seeing you. I hope you don't mind that I, so to speak, maintain our friendly relations. I smiled. And I left. Leaving him there, his face twisted with hatred. Roman wasn't a fool. Arrogant, yes. Self-absorbed, without a doubt. But not stupid enough to fail to realize that things had gone too far. When I patted him on the shoulder and walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts, I knew he wouldn't let it go. He wasn't the type to take a hit without striking back. The only question was, how? It started with small things. A couple of times, I noticed strange shadows near my house when I came home late. No footprints, no noise, just the feeling that someone was watching. One morning, my car suddenly wouldn't start. I popped the hood and found that someone had cut the ignition wires. At the store where I always bought tools, my card was suddenly declined, with the cashier citing bank issues. Later, I found out that someone had used my personal information to take out multiple loans in large amounts. Roman. Clumsy, crude, but clear, he wanted to show me that I was wrong to humiliate him. But I knew this was only a warm-up. The real strike was still ahead. That evening, I was walking home. I had to leave my car at the shop, and honestly, I didn't mind the walk. The cold air was refreshing, the asphalt damp from the rain. I turned into a narrow alley I knew like the back of my hand. I always took this shortcut when I wanted to save time. Then I heard footsteps. Quiet. Clipped. Sharp. I smiled to myself. It was time. I pretended not to notice, continuing to walk as if nothing was wrong, until the shadow to my left lunged forward. A sharp movement. A man jumped out from behind a dumpster, swinging a brass knuckle. Sloppy. I leaned back slightly, tilting my head just enough for the punch to miss my cheek by inches. Wasting no time, I grabbed his arm, yanked it down, and drove my elbow into his throat. A choked gasp. His body convulsed, collapsing, and I let go, turning to the others. There were 3 more. Professionals? No. Low-level thugs, street fighters used to scaring their victims. I wasn't a victim. The first one lunged at me with a knife. I shifted left, dodging, caught his wrist, twisted it until he drove the blade into his own thigh. He screamed. The second threw a kick, fast, sharp. I caught his leg, pulled him toward me, and his chin met my fist. One left. He froze, gripping a metal pipe, his eyes nervous, his hands trembling. I stepped forward. He flinched. "Run," I said quietly. He turned and vanished. I exhaled. No unnecessary noise. But now I knew for sure Roman had decided to play openly. Well, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I stood over one of the attackers, who was writhing on the ground, clutching his throat, watching as he choked on his own spit. The fight was over, but this was just the first act. Roman had hired people to intimidate me. To break me. But he had made a mistake, he hadn't figured me out completely. When I was 18, I practiced kickboxing. At 21, I got into wrestling. Then came hand-to-hand combat, knife fighting, weapons training. It was a hobby, a habit, almost an addiction. I had always known that knowing how to fight might come in handy. And now, it had. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of the men who had attacked me, and quickly searched one of them for a wallet. ID, a few bills, a credit card. Name, Maxim Sergeyevich Lebedev. Well, Maxim, I muttered, taking another photo. Let's see who your friends are. I grabbed his phone and quickly checked his recent calls. Last incoming, Roman. Of course. I smirked, hit record on a voice message, and began speaking. Tell your boss that he made the first move. Now it's my turn. I pressed the phone to his ear, and though he weakly tried to push me away, he didn't have the strength. I hit send. Let him know. Let him feel it. Let him wait. The next day, I spent gathering information. Maxim and his buddies worked for a local crime figure, small time but incredibly cocky. They took the job quickly, thinking it would be easy. I decided they should regret it. In the morning, I found Maxim's address and went to see him. His apartment door was cheap, wooden, with an old lock. I pulled out a screwdriver, turned the mechanism, and stepped inside. He was in a deep sleep. I didn't wake him right away. First, I found his phone and copied the numbers of his employers. Then I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of cold water, and poured it over his face. He jerked awake, coughing, his eyes flying open. And then he saw me. Bro, he rasped, trying to scramble back, but I stepped on his chest. Don't move, I said calmly. Or I'll break your ribs. He froze, breathing heavily. Who ordered it? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He swallowed hard. I can't. I pressed down harder, and he screamed. Roman, he choked out. It was Roman, I swear. Thank you, I smiled. Then I pulled out a knife. Now tell me everything else. When I left, Maxim was still alive. But he would never fight again. I made sure of that. Now, there was only one person left to deal with. Roman. I wasn't going to kill him quickly. No, I wanted him to feel everything. Roman thought he was a predator. But he was wrong. The real predator was me. And now, it was time to hunt. Underscore 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 underscore. I spent the night without sleep. Not because of nerves. Not because of fear. This was pure, cold planning. Everything had to be perfect. I sat in the garage, sorting through my tools, preparing everything I needed. Inhale, exhale. A clear plan in my mind, every detail in its place. Roman hadn't just crossed a line. He had tried to strike first. Which meant one thing, now it was my turn. In the morning, I acted as usual. Made coffee. Stood by the window, watching as the street slowly came to life. Then calmly put on a shirt, buttoned it up, adjusted the collar. Olga walked into the kitchen, a shadow of anxiety in her eyes. She didn't know anything yet, but she felt it. She felt that something had shifted. I saw the way she watched me, her gaze moving over my shirt, my hands, my face, trying to figure out what was wrong. You're up early today, she said quietly. I finished my coffee, placed the cup in the sink, and turned to her. Busy day. She didn't move. Artem. I looked at her. Long, steady. Yes? She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. Something in my posture, my voice, my gaze, it all told her that her familiar reality had changed. I smiled. I think you have nothing to do here anymore, dear. Pack your things. You no longer live in my house. She froze. What? I stepped closer, looking her straight in the eye. You heard me. Artem, wait, I can explain. No need. But... Olga, I tilted my head slightly, as if considering, you really thought you could live like this, didn't you? A little with me, a little with him? Thought I wouldn't notice? She turned pale. I didn't want it to be like this. But you did it anyway. She swallowed hard, pressing her lips together. I grabbed my jacket, threw it over my shoulder, and walked to the door. Right before stepping out, I paused and, without turning around, added, "You have a few hours before I get back. If I find you here, you won't like me." I walked out. Silence stood behind me. I got into the car, started the engine, and allowed myself a smirk. She had played her little game for too long. Now, it was my turn. And Roman was next in line. I drove through the city, watching the streets flicker past my window, lost in thought. Everything had finally fallen into place. I could feel it in every cell of my body. This wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was rot eating away at me from the inside, like corrosion destroying the steel frame of a building. Roman thought he was smarter than me. He saw himself as a predator, but he forgot the most important rule: a real predator doesn't make noise. He doesn't announce himself. He watches. He waits. And when the time comes, he strikes so fast the prey doesn't even realize what happened. I parked a few blocks away from Roman's office. I wasn't in a hurry to get out of the car. I just sat there, staring into the rearview mirror, smirking. Do they still think they're playing with me? I wasn't going to break him in one blow. No, I would do it slowly, piece by piece. Until there was nothing left. No confidence. No pride. Not even fear. Just emptiness. The first step was simple. I called an old friend who worked in a bank's security department. We had studied together, and I knew he never passed up the chance to make someone's life miserable, especially someone like Roman. I need a guy's accounts frozen. The full package. Card blocks, system errors, income verification requests. Drag him into a bureaucratic swamp. What level of target? He asked without hesitation. Just an office scumbag who thinks the world revolves around him. Then we'll run the standard protocol. In 3 days, he'll forget what money is. I thanked him and hung up. The second step was more refined. I sent anonymous emails to his company with incriminating evidence. Financial manipulation, contract fraud, suspicious transfers to external accounts. Everything looked so convincing that even if he tried to defend himself, the system would pull him under. And finally, the third step, a personal meeting. Roman left the office late in the evening. I was waiting in my car, parked in the shadows. As he walked past, I started the engine, slowly, silently following him. He was already nervous. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the way he constantly glanced around. Maybe he already sensed that his world was beginning to collapse. I waited until he turned into an alley before hitting the gas. The car shot forward, cutting off his path. He flinched, stumbling back, but I was already stepping out, my gaze locked on him. "Good evening, Roman." He froze, then quickly masked it. "What do you want?" I didn't rush to answer. I just watched him, savoring the moment. "How's life? Everything good?" He scowled, taking a step back, but I moved forward immediately, closing the distance. "You've noticed, haven't you?" "Something's wrong," I smiled. "Money's disappearing, your job is on shaky ground, your phone won't stop ringing with bad news. Tell me, don't you think it's too many coincidences?" Roman gritted his teeth. "This is you?" "Of course, it's me." I took another step forward. Now, there was barely a meter between us. He was breathing heavily, fists clenched, but he didn't dare swing. He knew I wouldn't give him the chance. "I think you've realized by now that I'm not someone you play with," I continued. "You went too far. And now, you're paying for it." He swallowed hard, then forced a pathetic excuse for a smile. "Come on, Artem, we're adults." I grabbed his shoulder and slammed him against the wall. "Listen to me, you piece of shit." My voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was no warmth in my eyes. "You took what wasn't yours. You thought you could just walk into another man's home and take whatever you wanted. But you failed to understand the most important thing. I leaned in closer, feeling him tremble. This world doesn't belong to people like you. It belongs to those who know how to control it. I let go of him so suddenly that he almost fell. Tomorrow morning, you'll wake up and realize you have nothing left. No money. No job. No reputation. Let's see how long Natalia sticks around when you turn into a broke loser. He tried to say something, but I was already walking away. Underscore 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 underscore. Roman woke up in icy darkness. His head throbbed. His muscles felt weak. His mouth was dry. He tried to move but couldn't. His hands were tied tightly behind his back. His legs strapped together with belts. The cold seeped into his bones. The floor beneath him was damp, concrete. The air smelled of mildew, dust, and the faint metallic tang of blood. His blood. His heart pounded faster. He blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness. Where was he? What happened? The last thing he remembered was walking to his car. A sharp blow to the back of the head. Then nothing. A shadow shifted in the corner. Roman froze, his heart nearly stopping. From the darkness, Artem stepped forward. Calm. Confident. Dangerous. His face was emotionless, his gaze cold as steel. He walked across the room, his boots echoing against the concrete, then stopped a few steps away. Good morning, Roman, he said, his voice disturbingly friendly. Roman flinched, pressing himself against the floor as if he could disappear into it. What are you? What are you doing? Artem crouched down, studying him like a filthy, beaten rat that had trapped itself. Looking at you. Thinking. Considering. He slowly pulled a pair of gloves from his pocket and slid them on, never breaking eye contact. Roman swallowed hard, jerking against his restraints, trying to free himself, but the belts held firm. Listen, Artem, we can sort this out, right? His voice shook, his eyes flashing with fear. You understand, don't you? It was just a mistake, a stupid mistake. A mistake? Artem chuckled. A stupid mistake? He slowly stood up and then suddenly drove his foot hard into Roman's side. A dull thud. A short, strangled cry. Roman doubled over, gasping for air, coughing. I might have believed you, Artem continued, stepping closer, if you hadn't hired scumbags to kill me. Roman shook his head, wheezing for breath. It wasn't me. Artem didn't bother listening. He swung and punched him hard in the jaw. Roman's head snapped to the side, teeth clacking, blood trickling down his lips. No, it was you, Artem said calmly, flexing his fingers. He hit him again. And again. The room echoed with the sound of muffled blows, heavy breathing, and ragged gasps. Roman writhed, tried to shield himself, but his hands were tied. He felt his face swell, blood filling his mouth, making it hard to speak. Artem crouched beside him and patted his shoulder lightly. Well, my friend, how does your own medicine taste? Roman coughed hoarsely, spat blood, his eyes darting around in panic. Please, don't. Artem shook his head. Did you give me a chance? He stood up and walked slowly toward the barrel in the corner. He lifted the lid. Roman's breath hitched as he saw the heavy, gray-green mixture inside. Concrete. His heart pounded wildly. No, don't. Artem picked up a shovel, scooped up a thick portion of the mix, and examined it. You know what's interesting? He tilted the shovel slightly, watching as the heavy mass slowly dripped down. Once concrete sets, it's almost eternal. 10 years from now, 20, no one will even remember that something alive was once inside. Roman thrashed in panic. Artem, I beg you, you're not a killer. You're not. But Artem was already walking toward him, the first scoop of concrete sliding from the shovel. Roman shook his head frantically, struggling, but the straps dug into his skin. Artem! Please! Artem looked down at him and smirked. Oh, don't worry, scum. I've almost forgiven you. I just need to finish up, and all the rot coming from you will finally be gone. He leaned forward and slowly poured the first scoop onto Roman's chest. The warm, thick mixture spread, clinging to his skin, weighing him down, suffocating him. Roman screamed. He thrashed in the restraints, choking on his own terror, trying to break free, but his body wouldn't obey. Adrenaline tore through him, but his muscles were paralyzed by fear. Artem held his head firmly, fingers clamping his jaw, preventing him from closing his mouth. The concrete oozed over his lips, coated his tongue, packed into his teeth, sealing his breath. Muffled, strangled gasps filled the room as Roman tried to cough it out, but it seeped deeper, filling his mouth, trickling down his throat like death itself, coming in a thick, unrelenting form. Artem leaned in, watching his eyes. Breathe through your nose, Roman. His voice was quiet, almost caring. If you resist, you'll choke and suffocate too soon. And I don't want that. I want you to feel everything. Roman moaned, spitting out saliva and gray-green paste, his eyes wild, tears streaking his face, mixing with sweat and grime. Artem paused, wiping his hands on a rag, and studied his work. You know, he mused, smirking, there's something poetic about you becoming part of the concrete. My whole life, I've built things, strong, lasting things. But you were always a crack in this world. Small, almost invisible, but rotten. Now, you'll finally be something solid. He squatted beside him, lightly tapping Roman's cheek. You really thought you could walk into my home, sleep with my wife, laugh at me, and walk away unharmed? He shook his head. You told her I was a trusting fool, didn't you? Roman's eyes widened further. He couldn't speak, only moan and convulse, drowning in the thickening mixture, but Artem understood him without words. He knew what he was begging for. You want me to stop? Artem tilted his head, as if considering. You're asking the wrong person. He stood up, walked to the barrel, scooped up more concrete, and slowly, methodically poured it over Roman's legs. Roman convulsed in hysteria, but Artem just sighed. Relax, Roman. Soon, you won't have to move at all. He knelt beside him, watching as the mixture hardened, tightening its grip around Roman's body. What do you think, he murmured, almost thoughtfully, once the concrete sets around your manhood, will it snap off instantly, or will it take a few hits? Roman convulsed, his body arching in spasms, and in that moment, Artem saw it in his eyes. True, bottomless terror. He was no longer angry. He was no longer begging. He understood. He understood that nothing would change. That it was over. Artem slowly rose and looked down at him. You really thought you could take what wasn't yours and walk away without consequences? He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of Roman frozen in a mixture of fear, concrete, and helplessness. A last photo for memory. Roman wheezed, but Artem just smirked. He put the phone away, turned, and walked out, leaving him there. Leaving him in the concrete.